All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Climate Action Impact Collab. My name is Jamie Coyle, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at BLab US and Canada. And before we dig in, I wanted to share that first, because of the global nature of this call, we are happy to offer simultaneous translation into Spanish, Portuguese, and French. To access interpretation, you can use the interpretation button on your control bar. It might be hidden under the More button on the right-hand side, but you're welcome to use that throughout this call. All right, amazing. Welcome everyone to our first Impact Collab. This event series is designed to support and connect the B Corp community around the new standards for B Corp certification. Every month, we'll bring the B Corp community together to discuss one impact topic in depth and provide space for B Corps to ideate and generate collaboration to achieve these new standards. The release of the new standards represents a significant change for the B Corp community, and we believe that this change is exciting and an incredible opportunity for B Corps to continue to lead the way in meeting and mitigating the challenges of our time. However, we also know that with change, there can be worry and confusion, and we've heard your concerns about what it will take to actually achieve these new standards. We hear you, we are with you, and the teams at BLab and Sistema Bay are committed to supporting you throughout this transition. These Impact Labs are just the first step of an exciting learning journey that we are all embarking on together. With that, this Impact Collab on climate action is extra special, not only because it is the first, but also because we know that the time to take action on climate change is now. So we're bringing our communities across the entire American continent to do just that. And as such, this Impact Collab is brought to you by the teams at BLab US and Canada, Sistema Bay Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. So thank you all for being here. We're so excited to have you. Okay, we're going to start with some housekeeping. Like I mentioned, we will have live interpreters throughout this call, translating into French, Spanish, and Portuguese. We will not have translators in the breakout rooms, but breakout rooms will be available in each of these languages. We'll also have closed captioning. You can control how and if these show up on your screen by clicking the CC button on your Zoom control bar. The standards content covered today will be recorded, but breakout conversations will not. We kindly ask you to not bring AI recorders into these breakouts. We want to have sharing and encourage conversation between attendees, regardless of your knowledge on any particular topic. And therefore, we encourage you to share your thoughts freely as we are all learning together. As a note, BLab staff will be in each room taking notes on action items and any lingering questions, and we'll share those out with participants if necessary. Finally, if you want to share your thoughts or feelings or greetings, please feel free to use the chat. If you have questions about the impact topic itself, please use the Q&A function. We have an amazing team answering these questions throughout the call, and we'll select a few of the most upvoted questions to voice over live, so please be sure to upvote any questions that resonate with you. All right, here's what we're going to get into today. We'll have an introduction to climate action from Bagita at BLab Global. Then we'll have an overview of the climate action standard from some fabulous folks at SME Climate Hub and Greenheart. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate you all so much. And then we'll hear from Explorer Hotels, who will share about their journey in climate action. They're a Chilean tourism company, so we're really excited to hear from Juan later today. And then we'll have time for Q&A. After that, we'll wrap up with some calls to action, and then we'll all end in breakout rooms. And these breakout rooms will be separated by language and company size. And this is really a space to dig into the collective knowledge of the folks on this call, so I encourage you to stay and join and participate if you're able. And since today is all about climate action, it's important for us at BLab US and Canada and Sistema Bay to honor and acknowledge the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. Personally, I'm joining from the lands of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people, where I'm honored to enjoy the incredible mountains all year round, skiing, hiking, and camping. I invite you all to share in the chat whose territory you are joining from. All right, thank you. And now I'm going to pass over to Kylie.
Thank you, Jamie, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Kylie, and I'm the Senior Program Manager for Climate Justice at BLab US and Canada. I have the privilege of doing this work in partnership with Clementina Consens, our Senior Associate for Climate Justice. Right now, I'm dialing in from Oakland, California, where I call home on unceded Ohlone land. Alongside community and program managers in Sistema Bay, Brazil, Colombia, and Chile, we're really excited to kick off this Climate Action Impact Collab with all of you. So I've been on the team here at BLab US and Canada for nearly 3 years, and I've never been more inspired and optimistic for the future of B Corp climate action than I am right now. In what has already been a critical year for climate action, today kicks off our different country teams doing to support their respective B Corp communities in taking climate action work aligned with new standards. It showcases it as one of the ways in which the B Corp movement is contributing to the broader climate and nature agendas in meaningful and lasting ways. Importantly, this will set up our communities to show up stronger at global stages like climate weeks around the world, Brazil later this year, first to come together as a global B Corp community as part of the Encuentro Más B, the community gathering that's organized by our Latin American teams, which you will hear more about later in the call, as well as COP30, both taking place in Belém, Brazil this fall. So to get you excited and motivated to continue or start taking climate action centered in justice now, we want to introduce Ligia Antero from Sistema Bay, Brazil. Ligia.
Thanks, Kaylee. I'm so excited to be here and a little bit nervous for me. So first of all, sorry for my English. Well, my name is Ligia. I am Senior Coordinator of the Communities and Collaborative Causes team in Sistema B Brazil. And I'm here to extend a very special invitation to Encontro Mais B Amazônia. This is the most important gathering of the B Corp movement in Latin America and the Caribbean. And Encontro Mais B takes place before Conference of Parties, which will be held in Brazil this year. And it's a unique opportunity to send a powerful message from the B Corp movement to global leaders, urging them to accelerate the transition to a truly regenerative economy prioritizes both climate and social justice. And being the Amazon makes this even more meaningful. We are working to engage local business and communities in Amazon and co-creation this event. One that leaves a lasting legacy and delivers solutions for social and environment challenges here in our region. And this is more just the conference. It's a really turning point. And to finish, I'd like to share two important links here in chat. A beautiful video highlighting this edition and the official website. And this is a work in progress, but we will open the sales on May and offering tickets, accommodations, and all the informations for you come to Brazil. So thank you for your time, and I hope to see you here in Brazil. Thank you, Kaylee.
Thank you, Ligia, so much for that amazing overview. I hope I can join you all in the Amazon. That sounds fabulous. And now I'm going to introduce Brigitte from BLab Global to introduce us to the Climate Action Standard.
Thank you, Jamie. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Brigitte Nemes, she, her pronouns, and I'm in the BLab Standards team, responsible, among others, for the climate action impact topic. This impact topic, it aims to accelerate action towards combating the climate crisis, and I don't think I need to explain the details of the crisis that we are in today. So let's move into a brief introduction of the topic itself. First, I would like to highlight the size categories because that's very important when looking at the actual requirements. So how the standards have been designed is that you see these different size categories. It's based on the number of workers, but also revenue. Whichever is the higher puts the company into a higher size category. So for instance, if the company has 10 to 49 workers, but its revenue is over 75 million, then it would be under the large category, even if in terms of numbers, it would be a small size. So that's important to keep in mind when you're looking at the requirements of the new standards. Now moving into the climate action impact topic in a nutshell. So this impact topic requires companies to develop an action plan to support limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. There are different sub-requirements based on the size of company. And for larger companies, we also ask that they include verified GHG emissions and validated science-based targets as well. In terms of the setup of this impact topic, there are three main areas. The first one is that the company needs to have a process to measure its greenhouse gas emissions annually. And this is really focusing on the larger companies. Now, the second piece is to have a commitment to contribute to help keep global warming below 1.5 degrees. And under this requirement, what we ask is that there is a climate action or a climate transition plan for all size of companies. Now, for larger companies, here the validated science-based targets come in as well. So their climate transition plans need to reflect validated science-based targets as well. The third pillar of this impact topic is that companies need to implement their action plans so that it doesn't just remain on paper, but we want to see progress. Companies need to evaluate the effectiveness of their climate action plans and make corrective action as well. And what we ask is that they are also transparent about it and publicly disclose how they are progressing with their plans. I also wanted to just highlight a few things from the standards. Let's start with the small companies, small and medium-sized companies. We have right-sized the requirements for them because we recognize their capacity versus large companies. So measuring GHG emissions, we know that it can be particularly resource intensive for smaller companies. And these small companies may also face the risk of greenwashing if they set targets without relying on accurate and verified emissions data. So what we did is for smaller and medium-sized companies, we put the emphasis on the action and require these companies to have a climate action plan with measurable targets that don't rely on GHG measurements. So this is very relevant because companies of all sizes need to have some kind of target that they can measure to progress towards. But since we understand their resource constraints, we don't ask that they have verified GHG emissions and GHG targets, but there are other targets that would still help them to reduce their emissions. Most of these companies already have an idea where the hotspots in their operations and value chain are. For instance, for small companies, it could be likely that business travel or the purchase goods and services, so the procurement. So they can have set some targets and some develop some action plans to address those hotspots in their operations and value chain. Okay. Now for larger companies, I would like to highlight two requirements that we ask from them in addition. So aside from the GHG inventory and the climate transition plan and the progress on it, I would like to highlight two elements. One is that we also ask large companies to incorporate just transition in their climate transition plans. So what we mean here is when we talk about just transition, there are two aspects here. The company's own climate transition plan might have an impact on its stakeholders. So here it's relevant that the company identifies who could be impacted by the company's climate transition plan and consider them and engage them and reflect that in their climate transition plan. The other aspect is that there may be communities or stakeholders in the company's value chain that are already severely impacted by the climate crisis. So here again, companies could identify who are those that are most impacted in their value chain, and also make sure that this is considered in the company's climate transition plan as well. Another aspect that we ask from large companies is advocacy. So meaning, how can they advocate with their local governments for robust climate legislation, but also within their trade or industry associations as well, so that they are all moving towards supporting the global ambition of net zero by 2050. And while we have these for large companies, this can also serve, of course, as an inspiration for smaller companies as well, to integrate these elements in their own climate action plans. And the last piece to highlight is the transparency and accountability. I mentioned that before, that we do ask that companies are transparent about how they're progressing with their plans, that they share it, but also the learnings. So how effective their transition plans are, what are the corrective actions that they need to take. This is not just increasing the credibility of companies' actions, but it may also lead to potential collaboration, because if others see that a company is struggling with a certain issue, there might be an opportunity to collaborate and work on that together. And collective action in general is a key piece here to accelerate the transition. Last, I would like to end with some general tips, and I think those on the call we will talk to, like Greenheart and SME Climate Hub, will also address some of these as well. But I would like to highlight a few implementation resources. So the SME Climate Hub has a fantastic platform that small and medium-sized companies can utilize. It has a range of tools and also a free training course in multiple languages. We also recommend that companies engage with their local business community. So here again, I would like to emphasize the role of collective action as well, because by collaborating with others, companies can accelerate their transition and support each other in this journey, and collectively solve some of the challenges to implement their climate action plans. We also have various tools in the standards itself that we are referencing. So in the implementation resources section, you will find a lot of resources. I just highlighted a few around supplier engagement, because we understand that for many companies, that's where their biggest emissions come from. So we have listed a couple of supplier engagement tools that could be utilized, like the supplier engagement guide by the Exponential Roadmap Initiative, but there are also others and much more in the standard itself.
Thank you, Brigida. I am going to pass to Lydia Elliott from SME Climate Hub to lead us into CA1.
Amazing. Thank you. So really, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about CA1 and the process in place to measure greenhouse gas emissions annually. Now, this is broken down into two different subsections. So one is CA 1.1, which is the company has a documented process to measure its scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions annually and discloses those results publicly. And this applies to large, extra large, and extra, extra large companies. So that's all about measurement. Then CA 1.2, the company gets an independent third party to verify its annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory, applies to all large, extra large, and extra, extra large companies in the following sectors: wholesale/retail, service with significant environmental footprint, manufacturing, agriculture/growers. So this is all about measuring your emissions and then about getting them verified by a third party. So I'm going to just take a step back and think about why it's so important to calculate your emissions. It can be a key first step for a business taking climate action. It helps see where you stand, understand where your own individual business's hotspots are, and focus on what actions might be right for your business. I work with businesses of about 1 to 500 employees on the SME Climate Hub, and it's a really clear first step for them too. In our recent survey that came out a couple weeks ago, 78% say they have calculated their emissions, and kind of using that to begin to learn, find the right resources, and understand what actions and things they want to track to show their climate progress. There are lots of ways to calculate emissions, from calculating yourself to free calculators to paid for services. It's actually a very busy market of different ways you can calculate your emissions. This year on the SME Climate Hub, we've released 3 new carbon calculators that are all free. And I'll just use 2 of them to give you some quick examples of how you could approach measuring emissions. So one of them is the Small Business Carbon Calculator. This is a simple calculator aimed at small businesses, 1 to 50 employees with one site, and really aimed at just getting started on measuring emissions and kind of understanding what that means for your business. Another one is the Advanced Business Carbon Calculator, and this is a much more comprehensive, transparent calculator, ideal for medium and large businesses, and it is auditable. You can go back and see what the emission factors are that each calculation is based on. So that would allow an auditor to go and a third party to go and look at it and see that the calculations have been done correct, which is what that kind of third party review would involve. And it also has the flexibility to add in multiple sites from different countries and regions. So that kind of helps if it's a more complex business with a lot of different sites and activities happening. So that's just a few examples of how you can start measuring. And then to bring us back to the Climate Action Standard, although not all companies are required to measure and report on their greenhouse gas emissions, the standard does recommend that companies do take this step. However, the standard is really focused on making sure for micro, small and medium businesses, estimating emissions doesn't distract from the really key step of starting to take climate action and taking climate action, because that's where all of everyone's focus should be. Now I'm going to pass to Fern Spencer of Greenheart to cover CA2 and CA3.
Thanks, Lydia. So I'm going to cover CA2 and CA3 as it leads nicely on from what Lydia was saying. So CA2 and CA3 are focused on businesses actually taking action on climate-related issues, such as how they're going to reduce emissions, how they're going to take account of climate justice and the just transition. And both of the requirements relate to what businesses are actually doing. So how they're engaging stakeholders and then how they report progress against their plans. And at Greenheart, we've been encouraging businesses for years to take action and not just set targets. So the standards are obviously really welcomed on that front. There are a couple of different nuances in the standards based on business size and sometimes sector. But as Brigitte said at the start, more is expected of large, extra large and extra large businesses, particularly those in the high impact sectors. So on the next few slides, you'll see, to go through in your own time, the different requirements for different businesses. So it's not, we don't think it's particularly beneficial on this call to go through the individual requirements for this. So this is on here for you to look at in your own time. But what we have done is we've pulled out some key highlights that go across CA2 and CA3. Thanks, Jamie. So these are the key highlights that we've pulled out. So firstly, like I said, there's nuances dependent on business size, but there are many shared principles throughout them. First one is that all B Corps will be expected to have a public plan on taking on tackling the climate crisis and how they are going to do that. And the difference here is that smaller businesses will have to have a climate action plan, whereas larger businesses will be expected to have a full transition plan. And that full transition plan is more in line with global requirements for larger businesses. The main difference here is the level of detail behind each of the requirements. So for smaller businesses, it could be that their plan is to collect better data, measure emissions, and look in general about how their business model relates to supporting the global ambition of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. A climate transition plan, on the other hand, requires more strategic input and reporting. And I'll go into this into more detail in a moment. Secondly, the real step change that Brigitte was building on is that the standards specify what is sufficient for businesses to say around their action plan. So it specifies how businesses are going to achieve their targets, and they have to be transparent about that. So it's pushing businesses really towards contributing to these emission reductions and communicating not just what their targets are, but how they're going to get there. And then once they start getting there, what their progress is. It's suggested that actions, regardless of any business size, are based on the SMART framework. So that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And that the actions in the action plan or transition plan have allocated resources to them. So that could be people that are delivering the work on the actions, or it could be specific budget for any investments that are needed. Another element is that the stakeholder engagement process should be brought through and addressed in the action plan, and businesses should say how they've accounted for stakeholder engagement. And obviously, action plans and transition plans need to be approved by the highest governing body of the business. Then we have reporting on progress. So all businesses will be required to report on progress on their action plan or transition plan. And that, like Brigitte said previously, it's really encouraging accountability and reflection on that action plan. So there are now requirements around reviewing and disclosing if targets have been met. There's requirements around updating the plan regularly and reflecting on lessons learned during the process. So it's really focused, this requirement's really focused on evaluating, learning, and continuously improving as we tackle the climate crisis together, and to encourage that learning from each other and transparency in our journeys. Then we have stakeholder engagement, and this has been talked about already, and that's required regardless of business size again. And it's really, so larger businesses have certain extra requirements, so they have to engage with their workers and at least their supply chain. But for example, larger businesses must include just transition in their plans, and also the impact of their plans on stakeholders. So that's leading on from what Brigitte was saying around unintended consequences. This nicely leads us on to the just transition element that's required. So a just transition is one where the economy and society transitions to net zero in a fair and inclusive manner by leaving no one behind. And for large and above businesses, their plans should include how they have considered unintended consequences of their plans. So for example, critical minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel will be needed for us to transition with certain renewable infrastructure, so renewable energy, for example. The mining of these can have a really negative impact on certain parts of the world. And so that's an example of where stakeholder engagement is expected from larger businesses to really take account of how their plan could impact other stakeholders around the world. Another example on this could be a business investing into projects that supports the most vulnerable to climate change in society. So it could be funding for certain projects, and that's really leaning into the climate justice lens. We then have trends around businesses making claims around carbon neutral or company net zero. We've seen so many different claims throughout the years, and there's been lots of confusion on what businesses can say around this. So another big thing of the standards is that businesses can no longer just buy carbon offsets and not reduce their emissions and then claim net zero. That's no longer acceptable. That's in line with the Science Based Targets Initiative as well, which is the global initiative for net zero on that front. And the standards demonstrate that larger businesses who are having to set quantifiable targets, they have to reduce emissions at least 90%, and then they can purchase offsets for the remaining 10%. say, and that obviously that aligns with more global green claim standards to make sure that everyone's transparent and clear in what businesses are saying, and it helps consumers to understand what businesses are claiming. However, what the standard does acknowledge is the importance in supporting projects that work towards climate change mitigation and adaptation, technological upscaling, biodiversity restoration, and climate justice. And it recognises that private investment from businesses is an important funding source for these projects, and they have benefits aside from carbon. So businesses' plans are recommended to include this sort of investment, but the plan shouldn't be reliant on them for carbon reduction. So finally on this, we then have, like I said previously, a focus on non-carbon impact. So another requirement or recommendation for businesses is to not just look at carbon in their plans, to look at biodiversity, water, waste, critical mineral use, so that we don't end up down this carbon tunnel vision that we have previously. If you can go to the next slide, please, Jamie, thank you. So this is another table that shows the slight difference that I talked about between action plans and transition plans. So, like I said, the requirements of different size businesses in certain sectors slightly vary, some having to have a climate action plan and some having to have a climate transition plan. There's a couple things to point out here. The first thing is that smaller businesses don't have to set targets based on quantitative carbon reductions. And as Rikita said, this is to avoid greenwashing and green claims issues, but also not to distract from the fact that actions need to be taken around reducing emissions. So for smaller businesses, their actions can be based on wider metrics and data points, such as it could be to measure their greenhouse gases in the future or improve data quality. It could be to reduce energy usage or water usage in their hotspots that they already know are an issue. Many businesses that don't have to report greenhouse gas emissions will likely be reporting them anyway. And so setting quantitative targets where they've got that reputable carbon footprint is still recommended, but shouldn't take away from the action towards what businesses are doing. So I talked in various detail around resource allocation for the plans. So for smaller businesses, they're only required to give narrative on what resource they have set aside to implement their plan. So that could be, for example, we plan to hire this many people throughout the year. Whereas on the other hand, for transition plans, larger businesses have to specify, for example, how much budget they've allocated, a numerical value of how many people they've resourced towards that. So just a little bit more detail required there. Stakeholder engagement is another one where there's slight variation. So the new standards don't specify how stakeholder engagement should be carried out by smaller businesses, but does require their plans to engage different stakeholders and that their plan reflects feedback from those stakeholders. For transition plans, the standards are quite specific on what that stakeholder engagement should look like. So it should focus, like Brigitte said, on those stakeholders most at risk and most impacted. So, for example, it could be those most vulnerable to climate change or those most impacted by the transition plan itself. The stakeholder engagement element is particularly brought to life through the just transition requirements in their plan that I discussed earlier. So, for example, larger businesses must take account of the just transition in their action plan, in their transition plan, and they must say how they're going to do that. Progress reporting is another one. So there's a slight difference on progress reporting. No, regardless of company size, they will still have to report on progress against their plans publicly. But for smaller businesses, they'll be expected to report less frequently than larger ones, just reflecting that resource allocation piece. Under the transition plans, businesses that are larger in size will have to report on their progress towards their emission reduction targets as well, because they would have had to set emission reduction targets. And lastly, larger businesses, including certain sectors like service sectors with minor footprints, will have to set, like Brigitte said, executive remuneration targets based on sustainability or net zero performance. So that's bonuses linked to progress against targets. And also they will have, larger businesses will have to participate in climate advocacy because of their level of influence that they have. So that's it summarized. We'll talk in the breakout rooms in a bit on kind of how that works in action, but I'll pass now to Jamie.
Thank you, Fern. And thank you, Brigitte and Lydia, for that overview of the climate action impact topic. This impact topic is definitely one of the most technical, but I think it also outlines the most potential for real impact on the world. So thank you all for all of your expertise. And now we're going to switch gears a bit to understand how B Corps might actualize this work by putting it into context. And to do this, we'll hear from Juan from Explora Hotels, which is a Chilean tourism company that offers journeys throughout remote areas of South America. Juan is a member of the advisory committee of B Corps for Climate in Chile and a launching member of the Glasgow Declaration for Climate and Tourism. So thank you so much, Juan, for being here. Over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. Hi, everyone. Hope you're having a great afternoon, morning, whatever time of the day you are in. And I'm going to tell you briefly about a story around climate action. But firstly, what is Explora? We are a tourism company. We build lodges in several destinations. Maybe you can move to the next one. We were founded in 1993, and we operate in different remote and very beautiful areas of South America, including Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, and Peru. Go to the next one. And then we have our purpose as a company, and it has changed. It changed in 2021. Because initially in 1993, our purpose was just to explore remote destinations and to take people to enjoy these beautiful areas of our continent. But we have participated and witnessed the impacts of tourism in all these destinations, and we realized we just couldn't stay neutral. There is no neutrality in this. Either you are part of the solution or you are part of the problem. So we decided to be part of the solution, hopefully. And we became a B Corp in 2021, and we also changed our purpose as a company. And this is our theory of change. We believe if people explore the wonders of our planet and they connect with them, they get to know them deeply, and eventually they get to commit themselves to take care of their beauty, to take care of everything that we have been privileged to enjoy. So they commit to conservation. And that's why we try to bring these people to these remote areas, and we try to connect with other initiatives so we work together for this purpose. Go ahead. Just a little bit about our climate history. During 2020, we performed our first carbon assessment, and as I recall those years, we had many assumptions to fill the gaps of information we had in those years. And if you ask it from me, the assessment we performed on the first year was, well, not even half as precise as it is today, but we had to take this first step. And I encourage everyone to take that first step into assessment, no matter how imperfect it might be, but just do it, because from there, you're going to start improving and go on. We realized about our footprint. We also realized that our carbon history didn't start in 2019, which was our first year of assessment. It started in 1993. So somehow any commitment we would make should take into account all those emissions from 1993 too. So we started an estimation of those and also included them in our climate action plans. In 2021, we became signatories of the only tourism declaration, international declaration, the Glasgow Declaration for Climate Action in Tourism, launched at Glasgow in the COP26. And we also realized that in order to take care of nature, we also needed to take a decisive and very powerful step into regeneration. So we launched our Torres del Paine conservation reserves, 7,000 hectares, almost 14,000 acres in the Patagonia near this iconic destination of the world, to take care not only of those hectares, but also to have a broader intervention and contribution to the conservation of the whole area. In 2022, we joined Race to Zero, and in 2024, we hired a consultancy to make our climate action strategy more precise with key verifiable results, with a transition energy plan, with the step-by-step details, etc. And we also hope that 2024 was our peak climate, our peak emissions. We were struck as any tourism company by COVID that prevented us from having funds for financing an energy transition. We are located, as I said, in remote destinations, so we're off-grid, and hotels were built long ago. So we are dependent and still highly dependent on fossil fuels, and we need to take that transitions, and we are looking for alliances. We are looking for different schemes in order to do so, and we're starting with the first big energy transition projects this year. So we're very happy about that, and we hope to reduce our emissions by 2030 and to align with all the the different standards that the B Corp has set now. So maybe go to the next one, just as a broader intervention. This is our strategy. We, of course, measure. We will focus on energy transition. Our scope 1 is by far the greatest source of our emissions. We have our plans to reduce, but also I'm very, strongly to regenerate nature. And we are working collaboratively with other tourism initiatives and other local stakeholders where we are in order to work on climate action. Go to the final one. And just some takeaways for this short presentation. We have realized that collaboration is critical, collaboration within the company, between different areas, but collaboration also with other companies. That's why we support the B Corp movement here in Chile. We provide awards, stays in our lodges for different competitions to incentivize more companies getting into the climate action. So we really believe that collaboration is critical, not only to reduce, but also to regenerate. We have realized that education, like we need to do permanent training to our workers, to the community in order to understand what is this climate change, what is this global warming, and what are the impacts that it entails globally and in the different areas where we work. We have also learned that we are not perfect in our actions. We are not waiting for the perfect plan. We just go step by step, and we go improving like one step after the other. And that's the approach we have to climate action, because if we waited till we had the perfect model, the perfect plan, we would still be working on that and done nothing. So it's just keep constant motion, go step by step. And obviously this beloved nature that surrounds us, we need to take care of that, and it's urgent. So devote as much energy as you can to collaborate to regenerate it. That's my short message. I hope I'm on time, Jamie. And well, I'm open to questions, comments, or whatever you need. Feel free to reach us at Explora. We really believe in collaboration. So have us as partners or whatever you need in this race to zero.
Thank you, Juan. That was amazing. If you wouldn't mind putting your contact information in the chat so folks can connect with you and support you on your journey. I really appreciate your authenticity and transparency, sharing your experience in this work. So thank you for being here. Now I'm going to pass to Kylie to lead us in the Q&A section of this call. We have a few pre-answered questions that were submitted on the Beehive ahead of the call, and then we will uplift a few of the most upvoted in the Q&A function. So if you haven't already, please upvote the ones that feel most relevant to you, and we'll cover those. But yeah, Kylie, take it away.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you. So we'll go to the pre-submitted questions first, and then as Jamie said, do pop into that Q&A and be sure to upvote as you go along. We're getting a lot of really fantastic answers and information from our team already live. And we will make sure that we can get all of that information and those answers out to you all after the call. So do follow along there. But for the meantime, we did ask folks to pre-submit. And the first one is, can you please clarify the requirements for companies that operate with remote workers, either partially or in totality? what will be expected as far as their tracking of GHG emissions? Brigitte, could you take this one? Are you still on with us?
Yes, absolutely. So here, again, it's very important to distinguish the size categories, right? So when we are talking about GHG inventory, this is something that's required only from larger companies. So smaller companies can, of course, and also encouraged to measure their emissions, but this is not a requirement for them. As for larger companies who may have remote workers, then what we rely on is the GHG protocol, so the greenhouse gas protocol. And there are various different categories that the company may look at in order to make sure that they are considering the remote workers in their GHG inventory. So we are not inventing the wheel here, but we are relying on other credible standards like the GHG protocol for companies to make sure that they are considering the right categories that matters to them. Yeah, I hope this answers. And also, if there are others who would like to add, feel free to jump in as well.
Thank you, Brigitte, for that answer. The next one, will previous SBTs, science-based targets, set as SMEs, small medium enterprises, be acceptable, even if the company is now large? SBTI say the new SME definition, SBTI says the new SME definition is forward-looking and will not require immediate action from companies that have already used the SME target validation route. Brigitte, any light to shed on this one?
I think here we follow again SBTI. So what we ask that companies have validated science-based targets either by SBTI or through another third party. But here again, if we are talking about SMEs, our requirement is actually it differs. So from large companies, we ask validated science-based targets, while from smaller companies, we do not. This is a recommendation. So I think maybe that's also good to highlight here, because I also saw some questions in the Q&A about potential verified targets for small companies, but this is not something that we ask today. This is a recommendation. And if companies are of larger size, then they have two options: either a validated science-based target through SBTI or through an independent and accredited third party.
Thank you for that, Brigitte. And this last one can also go to you, and appreciate all of your support here. The company gets an independent third party to verify its annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory. What constitutes an independent third party? For example, this company works with a carbon accountancy platform that does the calculations for them and certifies the end of year numbers. Is that enough? Or do they need someone like an auditor to review their methodologies and outcomes? And I would add, is there a list of independent third parties, recommended partners in the standard?
Yes, thank you for that question. We do not list any third parties because there are various different parties, and it's not our role as a standard to promote companies with a certain service. But what we list as the compliance criteria is the actual accreditation of the independent third party. So first of all, we also define what independent means, but most importantly, we list the actual accreditations, like specific ISO accreditations that independent third party needs to have in order to be able to actually verify that the GHG inventory is accurate and follows the GHG protocol. And in terms of maybe also to add here that what actually the auditor will check, that also depends a little bit on the assurance model. So to mention here that the B-Lab not only changes the standards, so the new standards that you see, that's not the only change here, but we are also changing the actual verification, the auditing process as well, it is moving to a third party. And we are currently looking into the assurance model, so like the depth of the audit, like limited or reasonable assurance. These are some technical terms, but it's basically about the level of detail that an auditor will check. This is something that we are currently looking into with an assurance provider. So it has not determined yet. So like what exactly and to what level an auditor will check, that is still to be determined based on the final assurance model that B-Lab will decide on. So there is going to be more information on that, but in terms of like the third-party verification, please take a look at the clarifying compliance criteria section of the specific sub-requirement around verified GHG inventory, and there you will be able to see the different accreditations that we are looking for today.
Okay, wonderful, Brigitte. And I just want to call out at this point, I know this is a lot of information. It's a lot. The Q&A is very active. We have some really solid answers coming in here from some of our experts on the call, and all of this will be shared in the call follow-up and available in the climate action group on the Beehive. So please don't worry about copy pasting it from the chat. So in the interest of time, Brigitte, just one more question for you. This last one is an important one around monitoring. And I will paraphrase, but it says, is there any planned measure for monitoring and evaluating progress during that 3-year period, the 3-year period for recertification? And then you said that companies will have to send progress reports on their action plans. Have you defined how often companies will send these reports? Is there any way to monitor and ensure transparency in the initial years of the standard?
Thank you for these questions. Maybe here I would also distinguish a little bit between a small and large size of companies. So for small companies, already from year 0 on, we ask a climate action plan. So that means that from year 3 on, we would like to see progress on those climate action plans. While for larger companies, what we ask is that first they have an accurate and verified GHG inventory in year 0, and then year 3 is when they set science-based targets and develop a climate transition plan. And then from year 3 on, we would like to see the implementation and progress. So there's a little bit of a shift here, but that's due to the nature of the requirements that we ask from smaller and larger companies. Now, in terms of the check, this also is dependent on the actual assurance model. There could be that in between these years, so for instance, like year 2 or year 4, there are some spot checks based on different factors. So to make sure that companies are continuously complying with the requirements. But this will really depend on the actual assurance model that B-Lab will conclude. But how you have to see it is that from the moment on that requirement applies, it has to be continuous, continuously meeting that requirement. So that means that there could be spot checks in between years as well, potentially.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. Deeply grateful for you and being here from the B-Lab Global Standards team, your expertise. Do still continue to check the Q&A in these last few moments. Make sure to drop anything in there that wasn't answered. And as I said, we do commit to getting those answers out to everyone in the follow-up. For now, I will go to call to action and next steps, and then we'll go into those breakouts with some of these experts that are on the call with us. So first and foremost, continue to familiarize yourself with the climate action impact topic. There's a lot there. Continue to study and get to know it in the breakdown, lean on some of the resources that will come out of this Impact Collab will actually be producing a Impact Collab guide specifically for this topic that will come out, I believe, at the end of this week. And that will be an incredibly robust resource, which will take you through the different requirements and as well as a master set of resources for each. So please do receive that and share it with your teams. Carbon Accounting for B Corps is a course that we're offering in May. The registration closes May 4th. I have several scholarships available for that program in the realm of dozens. So I will drop the link to that here. Please sign up if you'd like to join us. They're weekly labs, May 4th through the first week of June, really running you through the standard, running you through the requirements and how to carbon account and measure and reduce GHG emissions, how to develop that climate transition plan, all of that. So please do sign up for that course. The B Corp Climate email list is a really good way to stay in touch on B Lab's climate justice program work. I can drop the link in there as well to the chat. Join the Climate Action Group on the Beehive, which is an exciting new group just around upskilling and adhering to the standards. And we'll have that link has already been shared. It'll be shared again. And then last but not least, these upcoming global climate events we mentioned. We have Encuentro Mas Bay and COP30, both taking place in the fall in Belém, Brazil, and much more to come on those. So I will drop those links in right now and hand it back over to Jamie.
Awesome. Thank you, Kylie. So now we're going to be transitioning to the final part of the call, which will be spent in breakout rooms.